We just recollect that the purpose of the course is to try to gain a deep understanding of the Buddha's wisdom that leads us and leads all sentient beings reliably toward enlightenment. Understanding what to adopt and what to discard in order to most rapidly make spiritual progress. So we try to create a motivation of finding tools and techniques, things that we can begin to use in daily life in order to rapidly achieve our own enlightenment, which will give us the tools and the abilities that we lack as an ordinary sentient being to really be of great benefit. So focusing on that interest in gaining true expertise, true wisdom, so that we can guide others out of suffering. I think that's the purpose of our time. All right, good evening. We'll go ahead and get started. So I'll start by briefly circling back and then opening up for questions about previous material before moving on. So in circling back, there were some questions that had come up about the discussion, which was kind of an unplanned discussion. And, when I have unplanned discussions, I sometimes remember things that I heard and I say them, and what isn't necessarily meant to be a larger kind of thing, and sometimes I might remember it incorrectly. So it's a wonderful for people to clarify anything that comes up. It was a discussion that we had on the Pure Lands, and so one thing is, in my mind, when I was remembering and relating things, my mind was going mostly to Sukhavati, which is sort of the most widely practiced, because every enlightened being creates a pure land when they achieve enlightenment, and there are many different pure lands for which there are practices. Of course, there are many more pure lands of just enlightened beings, and there are no practices for them, but there are specific practices for a variety of specific pure lands. But Sukhavati is the one where kind of the bar to entry is the lowest. Whereas, of course, there's Vajrayogini and Haruka and, all kinds of different pure lands that highest yoga tantra practitioners can gain access to, and different things of that sort. And so I want to just clarify that I wasn't attempting to give any sort of practice advice to people about how to approach um, thinking about the Pure Lands, or thinking about making, because there's many sadhanas, that where that's part of the sadhana. There's prayers, Lama Tsongkhapa has prayers where that's part of the overall prayer. um, and so it's an incredibly widely practiced thing. I was just remarking on how there historically have some very special practitioners that, um, for them, they might have seen or might have felt that they needed just a few more years of practice. They just needed, kind of one additional lifetime, and with that, they would achieve full enlightenment. And so, with Sukhavati, though, there's these different levels, beings of different levels of merit. Um, take rebirth in Sukhavati, and there's different periods of time that those different levels correlate to. Uh, and so I was, just meant to say that in rare instances, um, for very unique practitioners, for them, their incredible compassion, their incredible wish to only take another 50 years to get to that goal, rather than maybe something that's quite a bit longer in terms of um, you know just the amount of time that it would take. That would be a reason why they might. And also, you find examples of people who pray to be reborn in hell, which is also an example of an incredibly rare. Now, due to the force of that compassionate wish, they don't take rebirth in hell. They would take rebirth in an upper realm, but their willingness, that's the prayer that they actually make. Um, so, it could work similarly with the Pure Lands. I don't know. It could work. That could be that due to the force of because when they say that the beings who have made that prayer, they don't experience hell in any kind of way that we would, under the influence of karma and delusion. And you know um, but so that so it could be that a being who makes a prayer like, don't just give me a few more years of one additional lifetime, where I just, within 30 years, I'll grow up and become a Vajra master, and that's it. you know could be that they then take rebirth in a very, very special Pure Land with tantric teachings, and very special sorts of things that's not common. So there certainly are Pure Lands without Vajrayana teachings, and there certainly are Pure Lands with some sort of Vajrayana tantric teachings. I don't i don't know if they do say tantric teachings. I personally am not sure if that means that um, the methods are there also, or if it's just tantric teachings. That I'm not clear on. But certainly there are Pure Lands where Vajrayana is taught. I'm not sure if they have different methods that are unique to those kinds of forms, that are different than the methods that we have that are unique to our forms. That's pretty technical, and I'm not sure. Um, so I wasn't trying to disabuse anyone of praying to be reborn in the Pure Lands. Um, just to, it could very well be that for 98% of practitioners, that's the way to go. Um, I can't say. I just think it's inspiring, just like it's inspiring to think about people who pray to be reborn in hell. I just kind of find it inspiring in that same sort of way, that some unique practitioners are like that. Okay, anything else from previous material? Yep.
in these chapters on guru devotion themselves, are they talking about a general guru, like the general teacher guru, or are they talking now about samaya then?
So they're talking about one's relationship to one's own root guru. So it's not something that applies just because a person is Buddhist, or, because a person, um, it, it's pretty much, because they don't really give an example of like taking Shakyamuni Buddha as one's root guru. Like that's not really um, the same sort of thing. If a person hasn't, so there's a difference maybe between like, I haven't met anyone that's suitable for me to take as a guru, but I still want to learn and train and take, make advancement and that sort of thing. Versus, I have met that person and I do want to take them. It really mainly applies after a person has met a specific person, and then not they're not just like taking teaching, because there could be there could you might enjoy going to a center in your area, and there might be a really nice teacher there who leads meditation very well, and you enjoy it and you go, but you don't have any thought of like relating to that person in any kind of unique way. um, so this is more like you've now decided that this person is your own root guru, and perhaps you even, if maybe you've taken vows from them, you've taken an initiation from them, that creates a guru teacher disciple relationship in and of itself. Maybe you approach them and ask them if they are willing to take you as a student, which might help them to give them greater permission. Because if they don't think of you in that way, then they might hold back. They might not push you in the same way. They might not check in with you. They might not kind of push your buttons in the same way. But if they are relating, if they know that you're relating to them as their teacher and they're agreeing to you to relate to you as their student, then that gives them a greater freedom to um, kind of be more direct and kind of help you confront your self-cherishing mind and all of that in ways that they might think is inappropriate if they're not thinking of you in that way. So it can be helpful to actually have a conversation if it's not a situation where you've taken ordination or you've taken lay vows or something like that, um, or a tantric initiation or something. So the word, so generally the word samaya comes into play most often with respect to Vajrayana, specifically the tantric vows and commitments. Um, but there is a certain level of samaya with any kind of, with the, if you've taken lay vows, or if you've taken any, even the lower tantras, there's a certain level of but it comes in most seriously with respect to Vajrayana, the practice of Vajrayana, and your tantric master. That kind of samaya is the most critical. But yeah, I mean, there is a certain, once you have taken a teacher and if you've taken vows from them, that's a samaya relationship. And also too, if they keeping your vows well, um, keeping your initiation requirements at whatever level well, and then just trying to also put into practice the things that they're teaching. That's also, if you regard someone as a teacher and they teach on the importance of maybe you haven't taken vows yet, or but they teach on the importance of not killing, or the importance, and then you just sort of, that they taught on that, but you just sort of discard it. Then you're not, that's kind of improper reliance in a way, and just sort of disregarding their advice. So, and Samaya would come into play to some degree too, when you specifically ask for practice advice, and then if you just ignore it, then that's, any other. Okay, so we'll start then talking about the disadvantages of improper reliance. And so we'll start with day 22. And in day 22, Lama Zopa alludes to the 8 benefits and then the 8 disadvantages. So I just wanted to share, looked at that, but just to recap, I'll share a little document.
Cannot hear you, Dondrub.
You're muted.
So when I was sharing, it turns off my microphone when I share, which is weird. I don't know why it does that. So you'll just have to read them yourself. I was just reading them out loud, which y'all can read. So okay, and I can I don't know if I can drop it in the chat on this or not, because I'm on a Chromebook and it's weird. I don't have like, yeah, I can actually. Okay, so I put it in the chat too if you want to have the document. Didn't It's called untitled document, which is not helpful, but sorry. So those are the 8 advantages that we've covered, and I always think they're kind of funny because the 8th one is it fulfills all of your wishes, and it's like, what? Couldn't we just say that? Like they have all of these other 7 that are like specific. Then the 8th is you just get everything that you want, and they say, well, this includes all of the other ones. So I was like, well, there's just one then. But I guess it's helpful to think about individual aspects of all of that. And then he alludes to the disadvantages, the 8 disadvantages, and those are really essentially just the opposite of all of the advantages. So instead of moving closer to enlightenment, we move further away from enlightenment. Instead of being impervious to interfering forces, we become subject to interfering forces. Basically, we create the causes and conditions to experience a lower realm rebirth rather than an upper, so it's just sort of the opposite of all of the advantages. Is there anything, any question about that?
Is it possible to incur the disadvantages accidentally?
Not really. I mean, he points out if we choose, he does point out in the day 22 snippet, if we choose to just never pursue a guru disciple relationship, which is an option, if we choose that path, he says that in and of itself is a shortcoming, because we have this path open to us that would be there if we decided to have that, and we're just deciding I don't want to. No, that doesn't mean that we should rush into it before we're prepared. It doesn't mean that just we have to immediately go out and try to, but we should maybe aspire to become prepared, aspire to, at some point. So if we kind of close off our minds to the idea, Lama Zopa points out that that's a disadvantage. I guess the only way that it could happen accidentally is if a person just doesn't understand how to properly, like what the whole topic is about. They might see the benefit of having someone who's very learned, very skilled, guy, helping them, getting advice from that person, but they might not understand the whole broad context of training in seeing that person as fully enlightened, how to have they might just think of them as like, oh yeah, this really smart, advanced person who's like helping me. And then if they think of them in that way, I would say that there's, if they then start to really find a lot of fault or be really critical or be disparaging, um, I think the karma of it is tricky because there wasn't the initial taking of that person as being something unique, and that has an impact on the subsequent karma. So, but they are regarding that person as someone who is like above them and playing like, so it's hard to say. I think that the specific disadvantages depend upon going into the relationship in a unique way, like actually creating a unique, because if you choose not to do that, then for you, that's just sort of an ordinary person. So you get ordinary disadvantages, like you're criticizing, a practitioner, you're criticizing someone that that you have respect for, or that you had some respect for, or that holds, but because they never meant anything unique, then the specific disadvantages are, so I think it would be difficult to know how to go into that and to create it in the right way, and then also feel like it's okay to be disparaging, to be disrespectful, to be, um, to turn away. There could be gradations of that. Like a person might, there could be disagreements about how intensely or how seriously a person should hold that relationship. And what I mean by that is that a person might be really willing to engage in the whole thing, but only up to a certain point. And like if the guru shows behavior that violates that particular boundary, then they might feel, oh, well, now at this point, now I can be really hateful, really disparaging, really. They might not know how to exit that in a better way, a less detrimental way. And so because they were kind of really doing everything quite well up until then, and there really was a very unique and very special thing, but then there was like a red line that was crossed, and they felt like, because they hadn't really, and you know people can just disagree too, I mean, it's a really hard, it can be a really hard, a really challenging thing when people are faced with those extreme examples. Like, how do you relate to your own teacher if those extreme examples are what's happening? um, it it might just be more than a person can do, um, because of what they've become, just the habits that they've, what's being asked of that person is quite intense. And to some degree you find some, like, and it's hard for me as a totally deluded ordinary person to know where those things are too, because you find, like, His Holiness, when His Holiness talks about this, because His Holiness's audience is like the whole world, he will kind of talk about, um, this in a little bit less of an intense way than like Lama Zopa is really intense about this kind of thing. So because he's not like the whole world's teacher, he's not trying to, I mean, he's the teacher of many, many hundreds of thousands of people, but not like literally tens of millions, or hundreds of millions. So I feel like His Holiness kind of has a little bit more leeway, and Lama Zopa is really kind of, even if your guru is like in prison now, you've still gotta do things in the right way. You don't have to go to them for advice anymore. You don't have to, but you still can't say hateful things about them. You still can't, you have to really guard your karma. um, you know and I don't know how to navigate, those kinds of distinctions that you find in different books by different enlightened beings. That's hard for me to navigate too. um, I think that, we just kind of have to hope that we choose well, and that our teacher doesn't end up in prison. um, so um, so yeah, I mean, I think that they would say that if you just, you could be mistaken about how important it is to rely properly, and you might give yourself an out in a way that isn't, that has karmic repercussions that you weren't, you know, anticipating. So in that way, you could do it by accident, but it's pretty, the bar. I mean, the bar is, not that low. I mean, he does say, I don't know if it's in day. He says even a small mistake made in relation to the guru becomes a great obstacle to developing our mind in the path to enlightenment. So, and that of course, to some degree relates to how karma increases over time. So if we confront that small mistake, then we can purify it and course correct. But if we're making small mistakes constantly by failing to uphold the training of seeing the guru as Buddha and all of these things, then um, I mean, just like they say, you kill a mouse or something, and then if you don't purify it in a couple of months and a year, like it's the same karma as having killed a person at that point. Like initially it wasn't, but if you didn't purify it, it grows. So
Venerable Dondrub, it's Cameron. Thank you. It's really a helpful discussion for a lot of reasons, but it seems to me, and I'd be curious to know if anyone else in the group has had the experience of kind of jumping in to the Dharma without, kind of like jumping in the deep end, without really understanding fully or getting the kind of advice that would lead one in a very positive direction regarding your relationship with the guru, because even though the information is out there, the language is such that you might not totally relate or understand it, and as a result create unwanted and perhaps unintentional negative karma. So it just feels as though, I mean, for myself personally, it would have been really helpful to have someone take me by the hand a little bit and explain, just explain fully. You read something and it might touch you somehow, but it's just such a different world when you've entered it. So not a question, just a kind of a.
does anyone want to share anything? Yeah.
I feel like I kind of have like a Chromebook experience in a way, because like I transferred from one tradition to Tibetan, and I feel like some of the concepts are very different. So like we had, for example, like teachers, and we also had like a root guru, but the root guru is like the founder of the whole tradition, historically speaking. And so like when I kind of came in, it's like, oh, they're a bit different, but I still kind of have those relations still. And like, for example, I remember taking refuge just like online with a different tradition because I was recommended. But in Tibetan, it's like I now have that karmic connection. And I'm kind of like, it's a little, I guess, like trying to keep track of everything and unpack it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any real experience with other traditions myself. Um, but yeah, it's because guru devotion is a topic. I mean, it is the first topic of the Lamrim, but it's only in the Lamrim, and the study of the Lamrim itself isn't something that people necessarily do right away. It can be a few years. Um, so, yeah, and particularly with initiations and things, people get kind of, they just sort of hear, oh, this person's coming into town, and like there's some peer pressure because like people are thinking, oh, they're really good, and you kind of go. So that kind of thing definitely happens all the time. People take, a bunch of different initiations. Without really understanding what they're getting into or what the commitments are, or that's really, really common. And but they say, the lamas will say that they've started to give these initiations widely, kind of just as imprints, so that we can get the imprints in our minds of the practice. So, if we go into it with a good motivation, and we get some imprints, then, that's beneficial, I think.
I put my comment in chat.
So, then in day 23, Lama Zopa kind of gives us the two things that sorry, I think we saw it. I think people saw it. Donnie put a comment in the chat.
Okay. Sometimes I'm not sure. Thank you.
So the two things in day 23 that Lama Zopa is encouraging us to think about in terms of um, uh, what is improper reliance, and how we get um, the negativity. It's to either give up the guru or to criticize. Um, so being disparaging, or so giving up is the one that might be a little bit tricky under certain circumstances, because you, even just by saying this person is no longer, you don't have to necessarily continue to get new advice from that person, but if you decide that something that they said or did means that they don't represent a teacher to you, that they're no longer even just someone that you regard as someone who is playing that role for you, then He says it's like giving up all of the Buddhas, because that person came to represent all of the Buddhas. That person came to represent enlightenment to you when you entered into that relationship, and now you're just kind of casting them aside, and then perhaps also in addition to that, making really negative, disparaging remarks. Um, so they would call this anger and heresy. But yeah, so but it is kind of, it does have to like genuinely, it is, it's not like you just get frustrated I mean, that might be something to kind of just purify that day, like if the teaching is like going on and you want to leave and you're like, can you please hurt, like just even in your own mind, you're like, oh my gosh, I really want to get out of here, can you stop talking, like that's not ideal. If your own teacher is up there teaching, and but we've all done that, or we will do that, like that's not, you're because the teaching was supposed to end at 6 and you're like, that's what it says, I have to, I have this thing, I'm going to be late, and so we kind of spiral, when that kind of thing happened, so hopefully, I mean, of course we didn't say anything, but just even, we had a thought that was like, that's not, I would say that, just that night, I would bring that up in Vajrasattva, but then let it go, like not, not again, just let it, purify that night, and then it's finished. Um, So when they say, criticizing, they really mean like out loud to other people, kind of trying to cause people to see faults, to be like, oh, that person is stupid, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're, you know really trying to, and again, not just because someone is a teacher, but someone that you've taken as your teacher. So you might say, well, it certainly seems like, based on these news reports or based on this police report, that this person who's considered a teacher, like that there are issues with that, and like pointing that out, if you have no relation to them, you know um, and you're really trying to be even, to get it right, and to, it's not like a tabloid, like you've really done some research, and you're pretty confident that there's reason to be concerned, and you're trying to help people avoid something that could be problematic, then that's, but once you've taken them as your own teacher, if you are trying to actively get other people to see faults in them, to see negativities in them, um, then that would be criticizing the teacher, and that's yeah. Yeah, and then in the next one, day 24, again, Lama Zopa is just saying that the result of that is a lower realm rebirth. The karmic ripening of that is, rebirth in the hell realm. um, so, but yeah, I mean, anger, because again, the word anger isn't is pretty specific. It's not just a frustration or like, oh, could you drive faster? Could something. It's really like there's a harmful intent that you have, like you actually wish to, you wish to create some sort of wound with your words, with your, you intend to actually inflict some sort of harm, be it verbal or physical, or it's pretty intense. It's not, um, it isn't just an easy thing to generate. um, but if you do, then he says every moment that anger is present in the mind, it correlates to an eon of a hell realm rebirth. And an eon has some specific, I don't remember, there's different kinds of eons in Buddhism. There's intermediate eons and great eons. So I'm not sure exactly. They relate to cosmological terms and like lengths of. So it's a long time. An eon. There's countless. There's great eons and then countless great eons. Sometimes the hell realms can be talked about in terms of countless great eons. I don't think he's talking about countless great eons, but a countless great eon, I did learn this. It's the time that it takes for a universe to be born, to abide, and to be destroyed. And that's one countless great eon. So it's a technical term. But then, like I said, there are intermediate, and that they relate to um, like world systems, the creation and destruction of world systems. So they're smaller lengths of time. But if you look at our universe, like you're talking about, it's 14 billion, 15 billion years old right now, roughly. And it's got, I don't know how many hundreds of billions of years to go before it's all just kind of a uniform field of subatomic particles. So that's one countless. So there are lifetimes in hell that are counted that way. But and then they talk about that's the sort of immediate ripening result of karma. And then they talk about in general, when we take rebirth in the human realm again, the result even in that is that we are delayed in our progress for eons and eons. So we might emerge from hell, but the realizations of the path will be put off for eons and eons and eons if we generate that kind of intense negativity toward the guru. So it has an after, and that's similar to what they say about like killing, the immediate karmic rebirth or karmic ripening of killing is hellish rebirth. But then when you take human rebirth again, you might experience more sickness, you might experience a diminished lifespan because that karma is still kind of playing out. um, so it's similar in that sense. But then if we go on, so that we end on a more positive note for today, we'll go on to day 25. Because again, Lama Zopa says, no matter how heavy the negative karma is that we've created in relation to the guru, we can still purify it. So we, of course, we want to avoid, purification isn't like a get out of jail free card. Like it doesn't mean, oh, I'll spend the next 10 years, 20 years killing and stealing. And then I hope, that I live long enough to purify it. Like we're not meant to think about it like that. But we do have to think about the fact that there have been times in distant past lives when there was negativity in relation to the guru, and that negativity is still in the mind, just like negativity from killing and stealing. And we're not immune to ever having done that before. um, He says karma is a dependent arising, as it is the mind that creates hell, because karma depends on causes and conditions. It can be changed through other causes and conditions. So he says that the best, if our lama, if we do think that we've made a mistake in relation to the guru, we should go to that person and confess that we feel like we've done that. And then he says we should follow that up with rededicating ourselves to following their advice, living the kinds of, doing the kinds of things that they would encourage us to be doing, um, living in our vows more purely, etc. And then he says that if we don't do that, then that pattern, as with all karmic patterns, the negative ones, we want to change. And so that's the purpose of purification, is to recognize that a particular karmic habit, karmic pattern is not beneficial. And so we want to adopt a different pattern, a different way of, so we replace, killing with non-killing, stealing with non-stealing. And so if we don't do that, then that karmic pattern will just persist, and we'll make mistakes in relation to the guru in the next life and the one after that, because we've internalized that way of improperly relying. Of course, one of the disadvantages is that we've already made it very difficult to find a teacher in future lives. But then, even if we do manage, the karma of it is that because we think, because the whole purpose of purification is to teach ourselves that this isn't proper behavior, that this isn't the right, this doesn't represent how we want to be in the world. That's, because many people will hunt and fish and so on because they think that that's perfectly appropriate, that there's no downside to that. And that's the whole point of purification, is that we're switching that kind of uncritical default unanalyzed perspective, and that just is sort of saying, well, other people are doing it, not a big deal, it's fine, with actually relating to it as a negativity that we ought to do differently. Because if we don't engage in that process, then that will just, that the momentum of that will just keep carrying over, and that same mistake will keep showing up again and again. Any questions? Nope.
Venerable, it brings up a question regarding the karma of the guru, because if a student has engaged in some kind of critical, either thinking or speaking, or decides that the guru has stepped over a line and that the student can't morally accept it in their own life, there's been a dynamic there, a karmic dynamic of sorts, where the guru has created some karma in that relationship as well. How does that work for the guru?
Well, so training, from our side, so guru, proper reliance is something that we are doing for ourselves, in order to get the most out of the student-teacher relationship. It's, we are doing it for our own benefit. So when the Lama Zopa's way of addressing finding fault is to try to think of it as some method that we don't understand, something that's beyond our capacity to figure out why it looked like that, why it it happened that way, because is it, and then so to not think about it in terms of ordinary kinds of ethics and which doesn't mean that we continue to, we may have to decide or feel like that way of relating isn't suitable for me, for what I'm looking for what I need, but that I basically don't have the omniscience, the ability to understand karmically why a particular action that might look wrathful, or might look, why it was done, but you might have to protect your own mind by deciding that that way of being is not suitable for oneself. So, because a fully enlightened being doesn't create karma, a fully enlightened being, they engage in actions, but their actions don't create karma, because there's no continuity of that kind of mind. Fully enlightened mind is beyond karmic formation. So if we're training and seeing them as a fully enlightened, we don't know if they're fully enlightened or not. But an action that an enlightened being does, that might look negative, doesn't have karmic ramifications for them, if they are in fact enlightened. So if it's outside of guru devotion, if it's just, a person who is a teacher, who is ordinary and does act in a harmful way, then then it's just a harmful action that they've created, and it's, it's karma in the same way as anything else. But within the bounds of guru devotion, because we're training to see them as fully enlightened, it's just kind of like none of our business, whether there's, we just kind of see it as not a karmic action that, because I mean, in theory, a person might be, an enlightened being might be creating a difficult circumstance so that a negative karma ripens for a particular person, to allow that to finish and not impact, them in a worse way. That's possible. So we might see, I mean, putting aside like really terrible, but we might see someone being kind of demanding, or being kind of, a teacher kind of asking a lot of someone, and we might be like, oh wow, that's really kind of intense. They're really sort of being, but they might see that that person needs to purify a lot of negative karma, and they might be helping them to do that by playing that role for them in that life. Um, so we would kind of see the guru as someone who's capable of that. And if that doesn't work for our minds, then we just have to say that doesn't work for our minds. But we would try to see them as having the capacity to be able to do that, which we wouldn't ascribe to anyone else necessarily.
Thank you.
All right, so we're past time, so we will pick it back up on Monday. So we'll just dedicate. So we recollect our virtuous intention, and think that participating in the class activated that positive intention, actualized that karma, created positive energy in the mind, and we have a sense of letting that go and thinking, may that ripen in whatever ways truly beneficial for sentient beings. Visualizing strongly that it ripens in incredibly vast and beneficial, profound ways that benefit every sentient being without exception. Okay. Well, I will see you guys on Monday.
See you all.